Front-End Authority is an online community that promotes the ongoing education of front-end technologies.
Thank you, Nelson, for the introduction. So as Nelson said, I'm not here to talk about Agile. So if that's what you came here for, I'm sorry. But hopefully, Chrome Developer Toolkit is something that can benefit most people here. Do most people here work in front-end development? I'm guessing since this is Front-End Authority. Yeah, okay, perfect. So if you're trying to troubleshoot HTML, CSS, JavaScript on the front end, the Chrome Developer Toolkit is absolutely like the best way to do it. I've got a small project here that we'll be using for it, so we can just drag it into Chrome to get started. And this is just a really simple site that I made. It's got a little mouse over animation, and it's got a link to my site down below, sunnydatko.com. You can check it out later. And so to get started, first thing we'll do is open our Chrome Developer Toolkit. So we can right-click anywhere in the screen and hit Inspect. Or you can go up here to the little hamburger icon, which is like my favorite icon, by the way, for that because of what it's called. And you can go here to Developer Tools. You can also hit F12 or Control-Shift-I, or if you're on a Mac, Command-Shift-I. But whatever your preferred way is, I usually just like hitting F12, but this will open the Developer Toolkit. Last time I did this talk, first question I got asked was how I made my Chrome toolkit look dark. So I'm sure that's really the pressing question everyone's got. And it's really easy. If you just look up Chrome Developer Toolkit extensions, there's a ton of them. So I just added a dark theme, so you can install it, and then you just configure it in settings. I'm going to start with probably my most used background task. Who here has problems with caching ever? Like, you open a file in your browser, and maybe you made some CSS changes, and they're not showing because something got hung up in your cache, or maybe you have that problem with like a client of yours that you made some changes for them and they can't see it. Anyone? Yeah, does this sound like a pain point some people have experienced? All right, here is like my #1 takeaway. If you ignore everything else I say, remember this. You can go here to your settings, and in your settings, under the network panel right here, there's a button where you can disable cache while the network is open. So this, when a page loads, it will prevent those files, those HTML and CSS and JavaScript files, from caching to your browser. But this will only work while the Developer Toolkit is open. But this can definitely save you a lot of minor headaches and frustration along the way. So if you only have one takeaway, this should be it. Just disable your cache, and whenever you're working, keep your Developer Toolkit open. I don't know if anyone ever has to mess around with pop-ups. They're like a 4-letter word, I think, for most people. But for some reason, the application that I work on has got pop-ups, and it can be really difficult to troubleshoot pop-ups. If you're trying to get a breakpoint in a pop-up, it can be tough to get that before it loads. Are you guys following? Is this even relevant? Am I the only one that has to deal with pop-ups? I hope so for your sake. But just in case you get put into my shoes, there is actually an option here. Auto open dev tools for pop-ups. So if you ever have to troubleshoot a pop-up and you're having difficulty getting the toolkit to open up in time, you can auto open it. And again, the parent window has to have the Chrome Developer Toolkit open in order for this to work. So those are a couple of the cool preferences that you can mess around with. There's some other stuff too, like if you want to disable JavaScript, or like here's where I configured my theme settings over here. But let's get into the meat of it. When you have got the Chrome Developer Toolkit open, your reload button up here, if you right-click it, actually provides some additional options. So normally when you hit it, it's just a normal reload, or the equivalent of pressing F5. So if you have previously cached files, it's just going to do a normal reload. But if you want to make sure that you're clearing everything out, you can do a hard reload. Sometimes you might have files that still get downloaded after page load. So if you really, really want to make sure that everything is totally wiped out during your development process, you can do a full empty cache and hard reload. And that will make sure that none of the files get cached, everything will get wiped out, and you're seeing it absolutely as if someone had just come to your site for the first time. So now let's take a look at some of the panels here. Chrome Developer Toolkit has a lot of features and functionality. Like, it's impossible for me to cover all of it in what is like a half-hour talk. So I'm primarily going to be focusing on the elements, sources, console, and network panel. And then maybe if I get invited back, if you guys like me, maybe we could do a part 2 and focus on some of the other panels. But I figured it's better to go more in depth with these than less in depth with everything. So let's start here with the elements panel. So the elements panel, I have a feeling that's probably what most people here are most familiar with. Yeah, I see a couple heads nodding. All right, so on the left here, we have a DOM representation of our web page. This is just a really simple, oh, hello. This is just a really simple skimmed down website. I just wanted to keep it really simple so that you guys could follow what was going on. If you mouse over the different elements here, it will show you that element up top, and it will also show you, it's kind of hard for me to point at things, but it'll show you here that what type of tag it is, what type of tag that element is. You can see it says image up in the top left there, and it shows you what the exact dimensions of that element is with padding, borders, margin, etc. Similarly, you can also go here, this little icon on the left here. This will activate your inspector, and then you could just click. I wish I had a little more real estate. Let's see, let's maximize this. Is it? I'm actually a PC girl, so it's the green one? Okay, yeah, so please don't like judge me here. All right, so we can use this little inspect icon here, and we could mouse over different elements, and it'll show you exactly what that element is and what its size is. Or you could select your elements down here, and it will behave pretty much the same way. When you click on elements, it will also show your styles that are associated with that element on the right. You can add or remove styles in order to see the difference in how it renders. We can click in it, and we could add new styles. So let's say maybe we want to add a border that's like 5 pixels, solid green. That looks hideous, right? It basically allows us to make changes on the fly and see how those changes would get interpreted by the browser. Similarly, we could also remove styles, and we can also, on the left here, I'm going to focus on the left panel first, since there's a lot going on with the screen. I'm actually going to focus here on the left panel, and then I'll get to some of the more applications we can do with the styles on the right panel. So, a couple things we can do. Is we can drag and drop elements in order to reorder them. So if I wanted my H1 header to be down here, and maybe I want to bring my paragraph header up here, it allows me to really quickly just drag and drop elements wherever they want to go, or wherever I guess you want to put them. Similarly, you can also hit the H button to hide elements. And you can see here in the styles on the right, it actually sets the visibility for that element to hidden. And you can hit H to bring it back. And if you want, you could actually just hit the delete button, and you could just delete elements instead. So sometimes if you have something that's maybe like laying over top on something, and you're trying to like get your positioning down, you can't find an element, sometimes it helps to just go in and start hiding or deleting elements and get to what's underneath. So let's refresh so we actually have some content. All right, so You can also search if you hit Command F. Actually, you have to be in Inspect Element, but if you hit Command F, you see this little search bar opens up down here. And we can search for text. You can also search by class or ID. So I think we have an element with the ID of header in here. So sometimes, like when you have a lot of different divs and like you have a really complex design, it can be kind of tricky to find like where is that one getting inserted. So quick way to find it is you could go here and do a search for it, and it'll take you right there. Similarly, that also works for classes. So here we have a class called link. This can be advantageous. Like link is a pretty common keyword. So, you know, like we'd have to dig through all of our different link files. So if you can just search by class name, sometimes that can save you a little bit of time. There's also a toggle device toolbar over here, and this will let you see what your page looks like on a phone or tablet, and also gives you a little, kind of mocks the functionality of it. Like here, because you can't really hover on a mobile phone, you actually have to click in order for it to work. So you can like click on and click off, and you kind of get an idea of like how your design's going to translate to a mobile phone or tablet. And up here, there's a couple additional filtering options. So if you want to target specific devices, if you're like, okay, how does my website look on a Galaxy S5? Or how does it look on a Nexus 6P? Or how does it look on the iPhone 6 Plus? You can toggle between different devices. And if you want to do your own custom device here, you could punch in your own, like maybe I want to see it on like a 768 by 1024. I think I have that backwards, but yeah, you can basically customize it and do it on your own devices too. Also, if you want to, you can go in here and make changes. So like if I want to change the text here and maybe say like, yo, then I can make these changes on the fly. If I want to undo these changes, I can actually hit Command Z and that'll undo it, or I could not hit Command Y. Never mind. But you can hit Control Z to undo it. I thought Control Y should work, or Command Y, but I don't know why that's not working. And if you need to do anything with your console, it's also conveniently located down here at the bottom of the screen. It also does that on a number of the other tabs too. All right, so I think that's most of it. You can expand and collapse nodes here on the left. And if you want to edit the entire element, like let's say you want to edit some of the attributes, you can right-click, edit as HTML, and then you can actually edit the entire thing. So maybe if I want to add, you know, something like class is equal to classy, oops, then it's really easy to just go in and add those things on the fly. So that's it for the most part on the left side of the screen here. I think what's really a lot more fun is probably the right side of the screen, because that's where you get to add all your styles and colors and things that make it pretty. So when we mouse over different elements here, we can see on the right here the style hierarchy that's associated with them, and we can also see where that style is being imported from. So on our paragraph here, we can see that it's got a paragraph style rule associated with it. And since it's at the top, that's the one that's taking the most precedence. And if we click through to here, that will actually take us to our sources panel, which we'll cover a bit more in depth after we're done with this elements panel. But that will actually take us to the exact style rule where that style lives, basically. And if you want, you can also control click and just click on the actual style, and that will take you to that particular style of that style rule. And similarly, this also works here. If you click on the value, that will take you to where that value is. So it allows you to get really granular with locating where your style rules are. And then you can see we go through the hierarchy. Our paragraph tag takes precedence because it's the most specific. Underneath that, we have one here that's an H1 tag, and a paragraph selector that has some additional styles. And then down here we have some of the default styles that are associated with it. Sometimes it can be kind of confusing, and this right-hand side can get really lengthy, especially when you have like 10 different style sheets and things start really blowing up. So sometimes it can be really useful to actually go here to the computed tab, and you can see just a full list of all styles that are associated with that element. And you can actually filter here whether you want to show all of them, and this will show every single style that element has, even the ones that are being inherited from default settings. And you could go in here and you can actually mess with the values too. Like I said, you can change these values on the fly, so if I wanted to make this like 5 EM, I could make it bigger. Also, you can just hit the up arrow and make it, why isn't this, oh, it's because I'm on a paragraph tag and that's cut off. I'm gonna do this for my H1 instead so you can actually see the changes. So I can cycle through and just hit the up arrow to make it bigger, like super zoom here. Or I can hit the down arrow and we'll decrease. Sometimes that can be really useful if you don't know the exact size you want and you're like, oh, I just want it to be bigger. You don't have to sit there and go 20 pixels, 22 pixels, 24 pixels. You know, you can just cycle through it really easily. And then if going up and down by 1 isn't enough for you, you can also increment or decrement by 10 if you use the Shift key, which makes it really big considering we're using EM here. And you can increment or decrement it by 100 if you do Shift, page up, and page down. And you could even get really granular and do it by 0.1 if you do Alt up and down. This information is pretty readily available. If you just, I don't know, if you want, I can give you my handout here afterwards if you don't have to worry about writing it down. Also, what's really cool is this actually works for the color selector too. So you can go in here and just move up and down and cycle through colors. And so if you know you want pink but you don't exactly know what shade, you can cycle through all the values of pink. I mean, here we're yellow, but you get the idea. And if you want to undo that, again, you can just hit Control-Z and it'll revert back your changes. Couple other cool things about the color picker is right here we've got a hex value, FFF, which is just white. But if you wanted to change that, you could shift-click into the color picker, and that will translate it to RGB or HSL, which is hue, saturation, and what's the L? Lightness or something? What was that? Okay. Yeah, I always use hex, so. Okay. So there you go. You can pick. You can basically pick whichever one looks good for you, or if you want a really quick conversion, this is the fastest way to do it. When you also click into the color selector here, you can use these arrows here to toggle between your color settings as well. And if you want to mess around with some of the predefined color palettes, since this is a Google product, of course they have the material design color scheme, and so you can make it really easy to have your website or application follow Google's material design, which I think is a really beautiful color scheme, personally. We'll make it red for now. Also, just a couple other quick notes. It will try to auto-complete styles for you, which can be pretty useful, especially sometimes if you can't remember exactly what it's called. You're like, I know it's border something, but what was it? You can just toggle through all of your different border options here. And then when you like one, you can just hit enter. And then it will even prompt you with the potential values that that one will accept. So here we could make it like cyan. And since our border is like non-existent right now, we're not going to see it. But general idea is that it will auto-complete these suggestions for you. Another thing we can do is actually force an active state. Sorry, it just happens when I get email. So if you want to know like what a button or a link looks like when it's in an active state or when it's in a hover state, rather than trying to force that state in the browser, Chrome Toolkit actually lets you do it here. You can toggle the element state. So since our image has got a rotation when you hover on it, when we select the hover, it forces it into what it looks like in its active state. And we can just really easily click on and off to see what that's going to look like for the user. And you can even see here, it's updating the image hover style to show that the image hover is associated with it. And when it's not, it doesn't show that. So it updates it in real time. We can also add new element styles. So if you go here, you can add a new style rule. And let's say, I don't know, I like borders. So we'll do like border 1 pixel solid pink. And now we added a little border to our image here for when it spins. And you can see here, notice that for other styles, it's being inherited from our style sheet, styles.css. But since we've added a new style, it actually adds it to what's called the inspector style sheet. And when we click through to our sources panel, we can actually see it's created a new style sheet here for us, separate from our other style sheet. And all the changes that we make to the existing styles actually get updated here in the style sheet in our sources panel. This is all right now just happening local in the browser. So when I refresh, those changes will be lost unless you map those files to your computer, which is what we'll actually be doing very shortly. But before we get into that, if you want to just save your new style sheet here, you can just right-click, Save As, and then you can just save that file right to your computer without having to open a new file, copy it into it. Makes it much easier. And then I don't want to get too into the sources panel yet because there's a couple other things I wanted to cover, but you can also track your local modifications. The only downfall about this theme is that this text here is in blue, which is like impossible to read against the black. But if you take my word on it, this text here that I'm moused over will let you revert to a previous style. And it will actually show you the changes that happen with each one. So here you can see I changed the border from 1 pixel solid to 1 pixel solid pink. And if I want to revert it back, then I can. Same here, if I want to revert my changes to style CSS, I can do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You can right-click here and go to local modifications, and that will show you a history. Since I just restarted it, I lost my modifications, but like, let's just go ahead and add some back. What are your favorite styles? Come on. Border. Oh, we already did border like 5 times. Background color is a great one. What's your favorite color? We'll do purple. Yeah, look at that. Our site's beautiful. I'm having like flashbacks to GeoCities here. So, all right, so we changed our style here, and you can see here, it's already propagated. It shows originally our background color was, I guess it got set to pale goldenrod by just default, yeah?
What's the number on next to each change? Like 20? What is that? What does the 20 represent?
I think that's line 20.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's go over to sources. I have a feeling, yeah, see, we can see here on line 20, that's where our background color change happened. So it's just what the line number is. And then we can actually go in and apply the different changes. I don't know why it's not reverting for me. You know, whenever you do a live demo, that's like a guarantee that like something's gonna go wrong always. So Bear with me, you can revert. It would be easier if I could actually read that text at the bottom of the screen. But let's not get too hung up on that. Let's just keep pushing forward. A couple other things that we can do on the Elements tab before we get further into our Sources tab is if you want to track animations. Let's make a little space here. There's actually this super cool Animations tab right here. And I don't know if anyone noticed, there's actually like a very brief animation, a fade-in animation on page load. So I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And you can see down here, it actually shows you what the animation is. And you could play that animation as many times as you want. And this could be really useful when you're troubleshooting animations, or even just trying to understand how animations work on someone else's site. And if you want, you could slow it down so we can make it go like really slow. You can pause it at certain points too. So if like something's not quite working right and you want, like maybe something's cutting out too soon or it's starting at the wrong time or you're trying to figure out what exactly is going on, it can be really useful to pause it and be able to slow it down. Again, we also have, oh my God, we're going so slow now. Okay, we also have this animation that happens here. So it shows another animation and we can mouse through that. And since it has the hover on and hover off, it actually has two animations here. So we could track each animation separately, which can be pretty nifty if you're into animating things. Oh, a couple other things here. Everyone here knows about the box model, right? Making some assumptions? Okay. Couple of cool things you can do with the box model here is, first of all, it'll show you what the size of the core content is, and then you can also look at what the padding is. So here we have padding of 40 pixels on the top, and it shows here what our margin is, which is about 42 pixels on the top and bottom. And since it's a block level element, it just expands to the full left and right. But if we want to mess around with this a bit more, like let's say maybe we want to bump this padding up to like 440, that's like a really drastic jump. Let's go for something more reasonable, like 140 maybe. Then we could actually mess with every single component of the box model, top, bottom, left, and right individually, and sometimes that can be really useful when you're trying to position elements on the fly. So if we wanted to add like more padding down here, maybe we want to add like 20 pixels, then we can create some more space. Maybe we want to boost up our margins, make it like 80 pixels. It gives you a lot of room to experiment with it. And I think that just about covers it for our Elements panel. Any questions on this panel before I push on? No? I just did such a great job explaining, right? Yeah. All right. All right, so let's take a look at our Sources panel now. Yeah?
I actually had a question.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible to trigger like breakpoints on a CSS event? So like on a hover, is it possible to like set a breakpoint when something happens?
You can set DOM breakpoints, which I don't have any example of it in here, but like if something is happening like in your JavaScript and it's maybe changing something in your CSS and you want to break on when that's happening, then you can do that. You can also set breakpoints here in your Sources panel with JavaScript. Yeah, which we're going to be looking at that shortly. Yep. All right, so Sources panel is really useful. It gives us, I'm just going to like close this little animations thing because it's annoying. All right, so on the left here, we have a little Explorer window, and this will let us cycle through our files, and then the source code for each file will display on the right. So keep in mind, right now, this is the local file that's being stored within the browser. But what's really cool, I have to unminimize here for a second. Has anyone here, let's refresh this too, get it all nice and fresh. Has anyone here made changes in your text editor, opened it in the browser, not quite liked how it turned out, gone back to the text editor, edited again, opened it in the browser, gone back and forth, finally made some changes that you liked in the browser, copied them, put them back in your text editor, and like gone through this cycle of like back and forth over and over? Yeah? Yeah, it sucks, right? Yeah, it's totally like one of the less fun parts of development. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm gonna show you a pretty cool workaround here. So let's get a little more room here. All right, so right now, these files here that you see in our Source Explorer window, these are the local files in the browser. But what we can do is copy our folder that contains our project into the Source Explorer here. And the first thing that's going to happen is Chrome is going to ask us for permission to access those files. So you'll have to say yes in order for this to work. So we'll just allow. And now you can see we actually have, here's our local version of all our files down here. And then here is our browser version. When I say local version, I mean local to my machine. And then here's the ones that are local to the browser up here. So what we can do next is actually map those files to each other. So the way we do that is we can just right-click on any of the files and just say map to network resource, and then it will give us an option here to map to what it sees as the associated resource. So in this case, it's our index.html file. And now, when we go in and make some changes, so like here we have a script. I'm gonna open it up in Sublime 2, if I have it on this computer. Yes, I do. All right, so we can see here, here's our changes on our computer. When we actually go into the browser here, and let's say we comment out these lines, and notice when we make these changes that there's a little asterisk up here, which is usually pretty universal for you have pending changes that have not been saved. So we can hit Command S or Control S to save it, and now it updates the file on our computer right away. So when we make changes, it happens to your local version right away. And this is where Command Z can come in handy sometimes, because if you maybe make changes that weren't exactly what you wanted, it's really quickly to go back and undo it, or you can go to that history panel before and revert back to changes that way. Pretty awesome, right? Yeah, I mean, if you walk away from this talk with like nothing else, remember to disable cache and that you can map your files together and actually treat Chrome like a full IDE, which is pretty neat.
So before you go on, a recap on that is it's in sources, and then you can drag a folder in. How did you get it to map again?
I just right-click
On any of the files?
on any of the files, and you only need to map one.
So you map one file that maps
Yep,
all.
everything, yeah. It just needs like that link that's like, oh, okay, you go to you, okay, got it. Your whole folder all connects. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty sweet. So let's look a little bit at debugging. Debugging is also one of those topics that I could easily do a half-hour talk just on debugging or more. So we're just going to look at it from a really high level. So Chrome, like I said, it's actually like a full IDE, and you can actually set breakpoints. Oh, I think we have to save here. Yeah, you have to save to set breakpoints. But we can set breakpoints here. Does everyone know what breakpoints are? Does anyone not know what breakpoints are? Okay, I just have to make sure. I don't want someone to like be lost and not want to ask. So, okay, so breakpoints basically allow you to pause on execution. And then what we can do is we can call methods directly from the console here, which again is really conveniently located down here. Oh, let's maximize again. Again, it's conveniently located down here. I can't find my little like scroll up. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. So We also have the console located down here beneath the sources panel. So if we want to call our JavaScript methods directly from the console, we could just start typing it and it will offer to autocomplete for us. And then you could just go up and down to cycle between your different options and hit enter and it will call that method. So since we have a breakpoint set in this method, it's going to pause when it hits that line. So right now we have a global variable called step number, and that just kind of keeps track of what step we're on. So first it sets it to 1. So when you mouse over your variable, it will actually show you what the value of that variable is. If it's something that you want to keep an eye on during execution, you can right-click and add to watch, and then it will show here in the watch what that value is. We also have a call stack here that will show where your function calls came from as you progress through. So I'm going to cover some of these guys like console.time and console.group in just a minute, but first we'll just kind of step in and out of our functions. So we can click this button to step over the next function call. You can also hit F10 or the Apple key and the apostrophe. It can be really useful to learn the keyboard shortcuts when you're debugging because it does make it go a lot faster. But so we can step over in order to step over a line, and we can step into in order to step into that function that's being called. So our first function is called first step. And you can actually see here in the console as it goes through each step, it's going to start, oh, they're being hidden by filters. It's going to start printing those steps line by line to the console. And we can see here, step number gets incremented. So after this line executes in our watch, we can actually see the value for it change. And then once it's done, it'll take us back to our main function. And now we're on the line for second step. So we could step into that one as well. We can step over each line, and it will keep printing it. And you'll notice that they're actually grouping down here on the left. I'm actually just going to make this take up as much space as I can. You can see they're grouping down here on the left. So I have a console.group, and that gives it kind of a header. And then I have console.groupEnd, which basically ends that. Does that make sense? So here's our header, step 1, make pizza dough, and then all of the console logs that are contained between the group start and the group end get indented into it. So it kind of forms like an organizational tree. So if you want, you can really easily expand and collapse these different ones. And if you're doing something, you're like troubleshooting and you're just setting a ton of different console logs in order to show what's happening at different points of execution, this could be a really good way to kind of organize your different log entries and kind of better understand the order and how things are being called. So again, we could step through these, and it'll make our different log entries and then increment our step number. So now it should be 3. And we can step into our third step. And you can see here in our call stack, we're currently in third step. So it shows the function we're in. It shows the function that called it. So we know that our make pizza function called it. And then it shows the function that called make pizza, which in this case is an anonymous function since we just called it from the console, which is like a virtual machine. So you see here it's the VM. And then here on the right, it also shows where those lines in JavaScript are. So for make pizza, it got called from line 8 since it's the third step. And we are on line 35, so it shows that here. And you can actually click to the different points, and it'll take you right to it. So we can keep stepping through and make our delicious pizza. And then we get back up here to time end. Time end can also be really useful if you are trying to understand how long a certain process takes. You could put console.time. You can basically sandwich your operations in console.time and console.timeEnd so that after it executes, it actually shows here, here's exactly how long it took for this function to execute. And then in our last one here, Console.log also allows for formatting techniques, which, like, I can't speak for you guys, but I work on web applications that spit out a ton of stuff when you're running applications. Like a lot of developer stuff, like, okay, this is starting, now this stopped, now this is starting, now this stopped. And if you're trying to find your entries in it, it can be a lot of hunting and pecking and sifting through, and it can be kind of difficult. So what you can do is actually format your console entries. And in this case here, I have a %C, and then it will actually accept CSS style rules for its second parameter. So I set the background, and I gave it a color, and I gave it a font size of extra large. So this makes it really easy to spot console entries. And now our pizza is done, and it actually takes us to our anonymous function call here in our virtual machine. So that's debugging on a really high level. Console.log also has a couple relatives that are not quite as well known. How am I doing on time? What? I'm wrapping up kind of soon. Okay, I will push on then. So console.log has a couple cousins that aren't as well known. Specifically console.warn, console.error, console.debug, and console.info. Again, this could be really useful if you're dealing with tons of console entries and you want to make it a bit more apparent, or some of them provide some additional functionality. So I can hit this clear button here to clear my console. And I'm going to call the messages. Again, it offers to auto-complete it, so I can tab to it and hit enter. And here it will show what the different entries look like. So console.warn and console.error actually show with a little icon to the left here, and it actually shows here in my code exactly where that error happened. So sometimes if you're having a hard time finding an error, this can make it really easy to take you right to that spot. And it will actually underline it in red squiggly marks. And if I were to go to my console here, it will actually show it as a console error message too, which will make it really apparent. Console.debug and console.info aren't quite as interesting, but console.error will also show you some additional information about where that error occurred. So it shows here this error happened in our script.js file on line 54. If I click on it, it takes me right exactly to it, and it can make finding things a lot easier. On the topic of finding things, you can also hit Command O while you're in this menu here. And if you're looking for a specific file, like let's say I'm looking for my styles.css file, I can just navigate right to it really simply, and you don't have to traverse this tree in order to find it. You can also deactivate breakpoints, which is nice. It still keeps the breakpoint locations, so you can toggle them on and off, but it won't pause when it hits it. And you can also have it pause on exceptions here. So if you know an exception's getting thrown, but you don't know exactly where, you can pause on exceptions, and it'll take you right to that line of code. And also, one last thing here about our sources panel is you can also set conditional breakpoints, which can be pretty useful. Like let's say you're running through a loop of events or something like that, and you're only really interested on what happens on like the 8th event or the 9th event, or when a certain condition's being met. Rather than pausing and having to hit go, 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 and then invariably you go too far and then you have to like redo it all over again. What you can do is actually just set a conditional breakpoint. So like down here I have a nested loop right here that would just print like a basic times table. So let's say I'm only really interested when I is 3. I could right click and hit edit breakpoint. And now it will set up a conditional breakpoint. So it will only pause on execution if a certain condition is met. So let's say I want I to be equal to 3. I'll clear the console, and when I call print loop, I need my function call. You can see here it paused right before, or right when I was equal to 3. So I could step through and I could actually see how it would behave only on that particular loop. If you want to go to a particular line rather than having to scroll, you can also hit Command G. I don't know why I think it's not working because I'm paused. That's not working either. I swear I demoed this on my PC and everything works there. And then I go do it in front of people on a new MacBook and like, don't have the same results. So let's see, we covered our console methods, console.group, console.time, console formatting. You can also do console.assert. So if you want to assert that something is true or not true, you can also do console.assert. And let's say like 1 is equal to 1. Oh, if I could type, that would help. You can also actually just hit the up key, and that will do your last console entry. So sometimes that could be a little shortcutter. And let's say we want to actually fix this to say assert. Nothing's going to happen because 1 is equal to 1. But let's say we want to see if 1 is equal to 2, which we know is going to fail because it's not. Then it's going to throw an assertion failed, and it will provide some additional information about where that assertion happened. Couple other quick shortcuts, and then I'll call this a wrap because I know we got some lightning talks to do after this. Over here on the Elements panel, notice when you actually click on different events how they say equal equal $0. When we go here to the console, we can actually use $0, and it will track a history of what our most recently selected element was. And it'll also work for $1, that will go 1 back. We can go $2, $3, and it will actually go all the way up to $4, so you can keep track of what the last elements that you had were. So maybe if you want to copy the last element you selected to a clipboard, you could do something like copy $0, and that will copy it to your clipboard, so now I could go paste it into Notepad really easily. You can also clear your console from here if you prefer by just using the clear keyword. I know it might be a little tough to read because my menu bar keeps popping up there. You can also use selectors right here in the console. So let's say I want to select my images. I can use jQuery. Quick side note here, if you don't have jQuery on your website, it's just going to use an in-browser version of this. But since I have a jQuery file on this page, it's actually going to use jQuery in the console when I make this selection. So if I do like the jQuery tag and image, it's going to return me an array with my image. And maybe if I want to get some more information about that image, or whatever object it is, like here, let's actually look at like our document. I can get a JSON tree that shows all the information about that object. And sometimes this could be a little bit easier to read than the HTML if you just want to know like what the values for certain properties are. And I guess this is going to be my last note. I was hoping to get to the networks panel, but I don't think time is going to permit. No. Okay, so come back for part 2. All right, so last note I wanted to say, Networks tab is really good, so mess around with it if you have a chance. But sometimes maybe you want to catch what's happening on page unload, but whenever you refresh, it actually loses everything from the console. So if I were to hit preserve log, I can refresh, and it'll actually keep everything in the log. But if I don't do that, then when it refreshes, it's going to lose everything. So sometimes if you want to catch something on like a page unload, that can be really useful. And considering we don't have time for the networks panel, I think that's going to be it. Yep.
Do we have questions? We got time for 1 or 2?
Oh yeah, I'll leave this open if we have questions.
2 questions.
I viewed a tutorial through Code School, and they have a pretty good one, and they have interactive challenges that you can kind of use along with it. I also viewed a couple tutorials on Pluralsight. My biggest problem is that DevTools changes constantly. So like the second someone makes a video that's like, here's how DevTools work, Chrome changes everything like 2 days later. So a lot of times they point to features that have become obsolete and don't exist anymore, or they exist, but it's not the way that they're showing you. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. I also read a ton of articles on just different like hacks and cheats and stuff that you can do with DevTools. And then it's just been one part experience, you know, a lot of it's just using it day in, day out. Mm-hmm.
Social networks, contacting.
Oh yeah, Sunny Datko. I pretty much, I'm the only Sunny Datko in this world. So, Sunny Melody Datko too. So I think I've got like the most unique name. So you can go to sunnydatko.com. Here's a Twitter link. It's basically twitter.com/sunnydatko. An email link, which is basically sunnydatko@gmail.com. And you can even check out my GitHub, which has all of like 2 things, because well, I can't really like publish most of the stuff that I work on for work, so it's just kind of like some fun side projects I mess around with. Mm-hmm. Yeah.